Resources Protection Plan, or Preservation Plan, and we finalized that this month on the 23rd of this month. And with the weather days, we had an opportunity for all the staff to, if they couldn't make it into work, they could study this, and it was made available to them online. So we're trying to get the staff all trained up on this particular plan so they have a better understanding of how we're approaching natural resources in the park. Some of the mechanical processes we want to put into place as far as when we make changes, different levels of change in the park, what we would want to do and how we would interact with the public in that regard, and then also what things would float up to the commission's level for, say, larger changes that we might see. So I thought I had my little PowerPoint in here and I was going to step through that, but I may have left it behind in the car. So I'll just step through the plan. It's that's what the PowerPoint did anyway. So it's about 63 pages, and it was something that Scott Miskill had started up, and he and I worked on this for a while. He had managed the first part, which kind of the overarching philosophy. And then when it came to section 2, which is more of this is the meat of the processes that we would use, that's what I worked on. And we went back and forth together to try to refine it. So section 1 was called General Procedures and Protocols. Section 2 is specific work for each natural community or habitat. Now bear in mind, when we built this, we used Theo Witzel's study that he did back on Miners Rock. He did a preliminary study, and he identified 13 habitats, 13 communities, and we used that as a framework. So we wanted to use some of the professional assessments that were done before to help build this out. Then section 3 discusses mapping and tracking tools, and then we have various attachments. The attachments, one of them, the first one is Preliminary Terrestrial Ecological Assessment. That was Theo's work that is published or is available. Attachment 2 is Invasive Plants of Northwest Arkansas, which is a field management guide. So what we did was we took some works that were already out there, and we used those as one of the references or attachments to our document. So we were going to use works that are done by other professionals out in the field. Attachment 3 is Lake Leatherwood Glade Restoration Proposal 2020. This was put in there as a citation pretty much because we use that as a reference. Leatherwood Site, Attachment 4 is Leatherwood Site Visit and Surveys. These are documents that we've been doing. We've been doing some surveys out in the lake, looking at the leatherwood shrub, which is called the Ozark leatherwood, which is probably anywhere from about 4 to 7 feet high. The bigger ones are 7, but typically that's our namesake in a way, and no one knows necessarily whether or not the lake was named after that particular shrub. But it is a very unique. It's Dirca decipiens is the name of it, and there's 3 other variants, Palustris, and there's Occidentalis, and there's one that's called Mexicanus. And the Ozark leatherwood is a very rare plant. It's not seen throughout the U.S. It's found up in south of Kansas City. There's quite a few of them up there in one location. And pretty much the bulk of them that we've identified are down here in Lake Leatherwood in our area. So it's a very important species to us and something we want to dig into and understand even better. Attachment number 5 is Lake Leatherwood City Park Black Bass Lake Zone Mapping Sample. And then attachment 6 is some site assessment checklists, and these are important because these are checklists we plan on having folks use when they're out in the field, when they're doing, say, some basic work maybe, and then when it gets into more advanced things and more extensive work, they'll run through these checklists, and these checklists will have certain criteria and requirements, so that if they do something minor, just say trail minor maintenance, that's not as big a deal. But when you're going to start moving things around, or you plan on moving things around, well then it goes up to the next level, say to the director for approval. And then if it's something that's major, like we're talking about work on the dam, then this is stuff that floats up to the commission. And it doesn't mean that it's very firm and hard in that degree. It just depends on the judgment of the director to say, okay, this needs to get up to the commission for those more serious things. And then at the back, attachment 7, we have endangered species list. And then attachment, well, that's a mistype right there. Attachment probably 8 and 9. Attachment 8 is birds sighted at Lake Leatherwood City Park, and attachment 9 will be observed plant species of Black Bass Lake. And these were provided by you know, local community members. They had gone out there and they had collected this information, so we're trying to incorporate that knowledge and expertise into the plan. So it's a fairly large document, but it's not really too hard to read, really, because in the front we come through, we give folks definitions, and then we get into the philosophy. And this is available on that same email I sent out if you would like to read it in detail. I won't do that to you today. But it gets into talking about the 7 or the 13 communities out there. And for example, one of them is limestone bluffs and edges. Another would be acidic chert woodlands and forests. We have mesic hardwood forests, riparian forests. We have riparian zones. We have streams, banks, and channels, lakeshore. So you can see there's all these various zones, and what we're trying to do is look at those and say, okay, where are these? Where are they in the park? How do we interface with those? When we do a trail, which zones does it cut through? If we're going to cut through a riparian zone, what are we doing to mitigate any hazard or damage to that riparian zone? What criteria are we using to measure that potential damage and mitigate that? We still want to build our trails, we still want to build our recreation facilities, but we want to do it in a responsible manner. So it goes through with those, and then it gets into, after we talk about all the zones, it talks about mapping and tracking tools. We use Google Earth Pro, and we use the mapping tools available in Google Earth to be able to outline the various areas, like the glades. We pulled from studies that were done by Nelson in 2016, where he mapped out all the glades in pretty much all of Missouri, and then he dipped down into northern Arkansas. So we use those and overlay those on Google Earth over Lake Leatherwood so we can see them. Then we map in the riparian zone. So we get a visual so that we can see when where a trail goes, what zones it cuts into, and where the impacts might be. So those are our mapping and tracking tools. We also have now, Public Works has, and we've contributed, I think, 1/3 of the cost to a Trimble TR2, I think it is. It's a, you've seen the engineers that are, surveyors have been out with a staff and a little dome on top of the staff. And what it does is takes extremely precise measurements. And we're going to start using that tool to get geochords for the various areas in the lake so that we can have a much more precise mapping of the lake and all our resources. And when we get into each one of these areas, when we talk about mapping, we break it down, we call it zonal mapping. We break it down into the zone, then we talk about what's our preservation plan for that zone, how we're going to monitor that zone, and we do that for each one of the zones. So it kind of gives the staff an idea of what we're looking at, and anybody who reads this will understand where we're coming from as an organization. Now when we get back to the checklists at the back of the document, after we look at all the zones, the various site assessment checklists, I took some of this, I went online, I researched other products that other folks were using, say for riparian zones, and then I built a checklist for each one of them. And the front of the checklist addresses modifications and change checklist, and on the other side we'll have an assessment and observation. So we want to continue to assess these areas, and we need to get into that as we go along. Start assessing all our resources out there, and I call them resources, but these are natural habitats, and we need to go out there and assess those. And then when it comes time where we want to change something or do something, we go through the modification and change checklists, and that kind of steps us through the process. So that's what the checklists are for. Now the checklists, we run those, and we have basically 3 levels that we look at when we accomplish those. We say minor changes, moderate changes, and then major changes. And that's what I was telling you, that some of the stuff can be approved by the site supervisor because it's minor. The type of minor change is defined in the document. Then moderate changes are kind of defined in the document as well. Not kind of defined, they are defined. And those will require the director's signature as well as the site manager, whoever's doing the work out there, site supervisor. And then level 3, which are called major changes, those would probably all float up to the commission, where we bring, before we do something, we come in and say, okay, here's what we need to do, what we want to do necessarily, and then here are the impacts. And then we can discuss, okay, how do we want to do that? What are the mitigation measures? Or do we need to bring in additional expertise, say botanists or biologists, to look at what we plan on doing? So that is the checklist process. And then at the back end of this, of course, we have quite a few references that enable someone to just dig into what we have out there as far as some of the species, some of the rare species, some of the species of conservation concern that were identified by Theo Witzel some time ago. And there are quite a few of them out there. And it's absolutely amazing. You get out there, it's just a blast. You go up to these glades, and when in the spring comes, and you start to see these plants pop up, it's a procession. Glades are always a procession. They look kind of dismal in the winter, and then in the spring, it's kind of like, okay, it's getting a little green, and all of a sudden, boom, you've got a whole bunch of forbs out there, and a bunch of grasses just going wild, and you start to see the blooms. And if you dig deeper and you look at what Theo's been doing, then you get back into the cliffs and the edges back there, and you start to find things like false powdery cloak fern, which is extremely rare. And it's nestled, it's an extremely small fern, very small. And it's up in these limestone cliffs that are on the steps of these glades, just outside. So when we talk about, we learn from that, and we say, okay, when we want to restore glades, we still have to be careful when we restore them. We don't want to back it up so much to bump into these limestone cliffs and then start to adversely impact the habitat for these ferns. So all this is just part of a process where we're trying to get smarter. We're trying to not only just manage the park and the recreation, we're also trying to be able to, when the public comes out, be able to discuss with them what they ask about the park. The employees will have more of an understanding of the resources they're managing. And that's the goal of the NERP. And it's something that Scott came up with, and any document like this, it's usually comes from a lot of people. And it's just that we have managed at one point to say, okay, we're going to do it. And we brought together those ideas into this. So that's what the NERP is, and we're kind of hoping that it will be something helpful to Carissa when she's doing her work.
Yeah, if I explain a little bit about how we're using the NERP as a foundation for the long-range plan. Because, the fabulous work that's been done by Steve, Scott, and multiple other people, it allows us to look at, so we're using it to assess ideas and proposals for the parks from a long-range perspective to see, well, what zones do they sit in? And how could we change that proposal so that it aligns to our preservation plan? So, for example, we're using a proposal for the Lake Leatherwood ball fields, which was presented and brought a while ago, but we didn't really have a response to it. But we can now go, well, actually, that part's fine, but this, where you're proposing these, parking area, it's in the wrong place. What if you moved it? And it allows you to kind of have a checklist and a process for anyone, whether it's a member of the public, somebody that wants to do, pay to put in a bike trail, whatever. There's a similar process that you follow that assesses it to make sure that it fits within the criteria. So anything that comes in front of the commission will have gone through the same process. Whether it's a small, modification, a major modification, we will know that there's been a process that's been followed that is robust and tries to balance the recreation and the preservation aspect of the parks. So it's actually generated a lot of discussion and debate, but it's if we didn't have that, I don't know how we could do the long-range plan, because now we can use that plan to sort of have a conversation with somebody that is coming with a proposal to say, you're going to need to modify it to address these things, and then we can sign off on it and present it to the commission. Do you see? It's really kind of exciting that it's there and that we can utilize it so that what we have in the long-range plan is going to be both some recommendations for what the future might be, but a very robust and tested process that says anybody that wants to can come and present, but here is our process, and here's how we're going to score it and weight it and debate, here's what we're going to go through with you before we come up with an outcome. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I want to use your example of the Lake Leatherwood or ball fields project. that was brought to the commission several times, and they've had ideas about that for years. It's to, down where the ball fields and the soccer fields are and all that, this is to add a recreation area that that's not there, and parking for it, et cetera. Well, before, there wasn't really a process for it, and there wasn't a real distinct way. I said that to Steve in the office today. I felt like there was a more robust, but there is really, that is the process.
That's
Planning
what
Commission,
we're going to develop.
develop this, and
Yeah.
then you can come with your recommendations or not to the commission and say,
Yeah.
this is what was brought before us.
Yeah.
No, I like
And
it.
you'll
I think it's
know
great.
that, like, for example, the ball fields, looking at that and going, well, actually, these aspects of your plan are in a flood zone. They have to be moved. Where can we move them? Let's talk about that. And you have a discussion, and there's a little bit of an iteration, and it goes through a few different versions. And the final outcome should be, okay, everybody's happy, we can present it to the commission.
Or at least not screaming.
Yeah.
Maybe some screaming along the way, but at least it gives you a framework.
Carissa, so I know you're kind of very new in this process of doing the planning. I mean, we've met a few months, but with what has to be done, that's still pretty early. So, but I just trying to understand the process.
Yep.
Because at least there was talk about one of the products of this will be a master plan. And I know that doesn't happen right away, but my idea of a master plan is that you, for instance, decide what trails you want in the future. And
Yeah.
so there's something agreed to, and it's not someone just coming up with a proposal and then
Yeah. Can I-
piecemeal. And I know it takes a while to get there.
When I said expectations, we will not have that. That we do not have the resources and we do not have the time. So that was part of the few months of trying to do this discovery,
Right.
was the what's possible with what we have.
Yeah.
So creating some recommendations for the future. There will be recommendations for Leatherwood, both at the ball fields and up by the lake. There will be recommendations for Harmon. There will be recommendations for
All the parks.
Bass, Black Bass. We're going to let Basin go on a separate track because there's a thing.
Right.
But it won't be a 10-year, this is everything we're going to do. It's going to be, here's some recommendations, and by the way, here's a process for anyone that wants to come and make further recommendations. It will be a dynamic, living, evolving document that will need to be added to.
So, I mean, do other people, I mean, you've received one proposal for the ball fields, but do other people know that you're accepting proposals? Other people may have other ideas,
Well,
and there's also going to be people who just want it left as is.
Yeah,
So how
and
does
that's
that,
one of them.
how does that all get incorporated into the decision making?
So there's a communication plan that we're going to be reviewing. I'd actually like to sort of pause some of this because we're still sort of working through the final bits, but I think kind of middle of next month, we'll be able to propose, here's our table of contents, here's what we're going to be able to deliver, here's what we're going to do as far as public input and debate. We are not going to try to, and I hate to use the term, but boil the ocean. We don't have the resources to put together a master plan. It will be a long-range plan with a process for people to come forward with additional proposals, and we can determine whether or not they get incorporated. A master plan for the next 5 to 10 years is beyond us.
Okay.
Unless this commission wants to dedicate a significant amount of funds for some dedicated resources.
Years ago, we talked to Johansson Consulting over in Fayetteville about the possibility of doing an actual master plan, updating our master plan, and we had a brief consultation with them in person.
Good.
And I forget how many hundreds of thousands of dollars it was. I can't remember.
It's a huge effort.
And
I
that
thought you were
was
going to
with
say
the
that they were
hope
going
that
to.
there would be some grants available to help out. Glenna was trying to, there was, when we got involved, they said, no, you're too small for what we do.
And I think
You don't need
that's
this
the
kind of master plan. You
realization
need
that-
like you said, a long-range
Yeah.
plan. You need, the word master plan it implies things that don't work.
And
But
quite
this
frankly,
is-
I don't know that we should have it. I
Right.
mean, generationally, these things will change.
Yeah.
And who are we to decide what the next generation wants out of their parks 25 years from now?
Right.
I think that we have so much deferred maintenance issues and stuff like that, that if we could just attack like what we're going to
Even-
do in that arena,
Yeah.
we'd be
But
way better.
even, but we will have something, and I think this is what I think we came to a realization that we couldn't come to the master plan. We just didn't have the resources, we didn't have the time, we didn't have the expertise. If we can create a framework, even for those maintenance projects, they go through the same process. You know, everything goes through this checklist and this sign off and this, are
And
we
the
doing
NERP
the
and
right
all
thing
that,
in the
yeah.
right place? Are we taking care of the recreation as well as the preservation? How's that balance? Everything goes through that. But we will have a number of, probably 4 proposals. Black bass, one of the proposals is not to do anything. And that's going to be in the plan, is don't touch black bass. Put in some signage, but don't do anything else. But the others, we will have some proposals, and we do have some recommendations for getting public input, but we'll need to prioritize those because we won't be able to do them all, especially if we've got basin. So, and then it's, okay, well, the priority 1, how are we going to fund it? What are our options? And maybe actually the funding aspects of it will help with the prioritization, because some of these are not self-funded, but they have funding sources built in that will help pay for them. So, yeah, so that's where we're going to end up. A framework for decision-making going forward and a long-range plan, but a process that allows people to input, and everything goes through the same process, whether it's an external, whether it's somebody from the public, whether it's whoever it is, same process.
And I think you said from the very beginning that this was going to be a living, breathing
Yes.
document.
Dynamic.
And it's going to have to be
gonna
able
have
to
to
be
be.
changed, and it's going to have, I mean, we don't know what is going to come down the pipe, right? We don't know what's going to
Yeah.
happen. But we do know, we have the lake right now, the whole issue with the lake. We have the issue with the
Yep.
railing on the dam. We have issues that are going on with Basin Park, some big ticket, big items that are really, but they do, even all of those things, I think if I'm hearing what you're saying, is before we touch Basin Park, we need to go through the list. What does it do to historical
Yes.
features? What does it
Yes.
do to this? What does it do to
There's
that?
a checklist and there's a
What's a minor
process,
change? What's a major
and
change?
there's a discussion, and we're still talking through some of the how does that work and what's the dynamics and how would that, and I think we'd want to get the new director's input as well. You know, there's still some outstanding questions in terms of how would we make this work? Who owns this piece of it? Who signs off? Who does
Yeah,
that?
it's an administrative process in many
Yes.
ways, and it's also potentially a research requirement, so there are going to be some incurred costs if you want to treat each one of the proposals fairly, and so you have to say, okay, yeah, we have a process where we do this, but who do you have to draw into that? Maybe, like I said, botanist, biologist, ecologist, and who's going to manage this on the staff?
There's a lot to be
Scott, when he was, before he left, had talked about a naturalist position. Now, is that affordable? Would that be a position that would manage that process? Would be something that I think the commission would have to discuss,
Yeah.
because that's not a small amount of work if you want to do it correctly.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah,
bits
and I
of
feel
it-
like our mission statement, when you
What?
go back to what you said a minute ago, our mission statement really is the one thing that does not change, so to speak. The mission statement is our overall plan. I feel like of the master plan, like I said, that word kind of, the living, breathing, changeable, changing, responding to the times, responding to what people, is what,
situation. You gotta-
is having a process, like you said, to constantly update it, change it.
evaluate.
Yeah, I love that.
And we're
and-
talking about, to Steve's point, there might be areas where really we have to go into a lot more in-depth study of the impact on on the environment than we would in other areas like down by the ball fields, which have been disturbed, which, have had a lot of traffic. They've had mining, they've had other things. There may not be as rigorous a process, but there will still be a process. So those are the bits that we've got to kind of work out. And we're using these proposals as kind of case studies to walk it through.
Are you on a planning committee?
Yes, we have a long-range planning committee. So right now, I think it's, if we have another commissioner join, then we have to announce it and we have to make
Well,
sure that we
try not
give
to do that.
advance notice. But if anyone wants to join, that is absolutely fine, but we just need to make sure that we follow the process because we can't have two commissioners meeting without advance notice, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So,
The press
so
has to
right
be
now,
notified.
there was just, there was, I don't think we actually had two commissioners ever, because we.
Hey, Brendan, you-
Yeah, I was going to say, we kind of handshaked and we didn't really
And you
overlap.
guys have done a lot more already than I would have imagined. You know,
A lot of
commend you guys.
brainstorming,
Yeah,
and kind of what's possible.
I'm
and-
excited.
Who else
Yeah.
is on your committee?
So we've got a number of people. We've got, so
Local
I
people?
I think, well, let's talk, can we talk about it offline, or do we have time?
Well, what I would recommend is every one of our normal meetings, we have committee reports. So maybe at our next normal
next one.
meeting, that you
I'll
do a
talk
full
about-
committee report.
I'd love to talk about who do we have on it, where are the gaps, because we still do have gaps. What's going to be the table of contents? We're going to have a comms plan, and we'll have an education plan. These are all very draft. The NERP is an absolute cornerstone of what we're doing. And then we'll have kind of plans for the sort of bigger parks. Not to nth degree of detail, but a sufficient one that we could sort of help people prioritize so that we can determine which one do we want to go into. It's like a high-level design, high-level concepts, and then we go into a more deeper dive into ones that the public thinks that we should prioritize,
Yeah.
or that we
Perfect.
think.
Yeah.
And we have to work through that. How do we prioritize and determine what goes year 1, year 2, year 3?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
So Clarissa, I'm really glad you're looking at the NERP and the environmental impact of these things. Is there also going to be a look at the economics? Because every time you kind of do this development, it very often puts more costs on the parks.
Yes.
Like, we have the ballparks, and there's some pros and cons for those ballparks, and I know especially the soccer fields are very used and beloved. But the
Yes.
park spends a lot of time mowing and a lot of costs, and it's an ongoing cost.
Yes,
The same with
absolutely.
the downhill. I mean, those trails are much more expensive to maintain. They're just taking a lot more time, need to be done a lot more carefully than
Yeah.
the regular trails.
She
So
said
all
compare
those
the
impacts-
funding and what's
Yes.
self-funded, what's not.
So-
She did
yeah,
mention that already.
I'm not saying you're doing this, but a lot of times that gets dropped out of processes.
And that is going to be part of the process. Part of the process is you can't come and bring these things to parks and expect us to pay for them. You have to sort of say, how is
Yeah.
this going to be funded?
Yeah, yeah, but it's not
Where
just-
is the money going
yeah.
to be coming? And
It's
total
not just
cost
the
of
implementation,
ownership.
it's the ongoing maintenance.
Total cost of ownership,
Yeah.
which is both your initial setup, your ongoing maintenance, all those things, totally agree. And we do have, and I think to some extent that might help us prioritize which ones to do, because some of them do have funding aspects built in, which are also big benefits for the community. But, yeah, I won't preempt it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love, we do have some gaps, so it would be great to get additional people on. We have somebody that's representing trails. As in hikers, we have somebody that's a biker. I need to call him back. We've got entertainment. We've got historic. We've got soccer and athletics. We've got the lakes. But we still have a lot of gaps. So it'd be great to get more people because I think there's a lot of work to do.
Well, then we really look forward to hearing your kind
Yes.
of presentation
Love
when
to.
you guys are ready.
Yeah, we can do it, like, when is the next one? We could
Next
do
meeting,
it.
well, we'll do a commission report about you every month anyway, and if you have something to report, you
Yeah.
can.
We can do it more
And this month,
detailed.
just because of the new people, maybe you could,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
use it for a recruiting moment. You'll be on camera. You can recruit.
Where
someone who's
everybody
watching,
that's
maybe.
on there is getting assigned stuff to do. So,
Before we move on, can I ask Steve a question? So I know the document you have assesses the site of projects. Does it assess the implementation? And I'm thinking about Hobo Hollow, and would it assess, getting equipment there, the impacts in the process of construction?
Yeah, let me see what I did with it. When you go through the checklist, it talks about, I have you looked at the various, let me get to that one. I'll try to get to, for example, if I can do riparian, because that's what you're talking to. That was a riparian zone. And recreational zone, hollow zone. It's going to be the last one I look at, of course. Riparian zone, okay. So you have assessments, and it's important to have assessments because you need to know what you've got in the first place. And I
Right,
think
yeah.
we have kind of a feel, but I'm not so sure we're really totally, well, I know we're not very knowledgeable about all the habitat we have out there, and we need to get smarter on that. But that takes time, and just like anything, when, you know, you get the scientists out there, their studies take a long time. They spend years on site to fully assess. We can't really do that, but we can get a better feel. But the assessment checklist talks about, like, for example, is 85% of the riparian area covered with vegetation? Are the native plants healthy and at their normal growth height for the season? Are native shrubs growing along the embankment with supporting soil? Are there successional trees of various heights in the zone? So as it goes through this, you can see that's getting into quite a bit of detail and a bit of work to do that. But, you know, it just needs to be done. It may not be done at the level of a scientific study, but what you're talking to is about the modification and change checklist. And this goes through various steps, says, have any other required zone checklist been completed and approved in support of this modification and or change? So it's not just one zone. Sometimes you're going to impact more than one. When you do, say, a riparian zone, it could be located near a glade, or it could be, and talk about avian zones. So you're looking at those. Will the modification or change maintain the current size of the habitat? So we'll look at what they're going to do or plan to do and say, does it change? So you're looking at the mechanics of the change. Will the modification or change enhance the habitat for resident native species? We can't always look at it like we're out there and damaging. Sometimes you're doing things that won't necessarily hurt and could help. Is the modification change sustainable? And we've talked about sustainment here already, and that's a key criteria to anything we do in the park. If we're going to restore glades, we have to maintain and not only restore them, we need to be able to sustain them over time. Will the modification change mitigate any potential damage or diminishment of resident native species? And that's getting even closer to what you're saying is, are you taking care of those species? If you're going to move them, do you mitigate that damage?
No.
So,
I was asking about getting the impacts of construction. So from the parking lot to the site, if you're taking heavy equipment or you're having a lot of people walk, are you assessing, is that included in your site, or is it just the site where the actual projects
the movement to the site.
Yeah, the movement to the site.
Well, I would imagine it should, because
Yeah,
if you're talking about, I mean,
These
you've got to
questions-
get it out there.
These
so,
questions
yeah.
will cover that,
So-
basically, because you're, say, like, you know, the modification.
Well, it says, have any other required zone
Right.
checklist been completed? So
Right,
you would
right,
be
yeah.
transiting probably multiple zones
So
in
you'd
that
be checking
process.
those too.
Yeah.
So, you
And will
know,
it, you know-
some of these things we haven't been able to put, and
Yeah.
bear in mind, this is the first iteration.
Right.
And when I built it, I said, you know, we need an
Right.
80% solution out there that we can get out there, and then we're going to refine it and refine it and refine it.
Yeah.
So some of these points you're bringing up are valid points, and
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
things that need to be included.
Yeah, I mean, Hobart Hollow, and I don't know they've actually did this checklist, but, you know, people went out and they looked and they said, we want to make this change to the rocks to cross this stream.
Yes.
But to do that, they had to get excavator up the creek. And
Correct.
so it's that excavator up the creek, you know, it wasn't part of the actual project.
Correct.
But it still has potential for a lot
Well,
of
it
impacts.
is part of the riparian zone. The
Yeah,
creek
it is in the
is
riparian zone.
so moving that
But it
excavator
depends,
is,
it depends what someone is looking at when they're doing that
and
assessment.
that's why we had training.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's why we
Yeah.
started
So I just want to
training
make sure
this month.
I just
or
want to make
last
sure
month.
that whole, the whole of it and the impacts of
Correct.
of making it happen, not just what happens at that particular site where the bridge or the stream crossing or whatever is.
Correct, yeah, you're talking about a holistic approach to it, and I
Yes.
agree with that, and that's the reason when we look at the zones, we try not to look at them in isolation. We look at them, you know, sometimes they overlap, and you have to look at that, and then, agreed, you know, when you're coming in through, say, a stream bed, well, again, you're in a zone,
Right.
in a riparian zone. So you're going to tap these zones no matter what you do, and you just don't focus just on the specific site. So when, for example, when we had that bridge, the small bridge put in, I went out there and discussed that, and we discussed, okay, where is the Mini-X going to come from? What's it going to transit? So it was transiting an area that has been scoured and has been part of that floodplain, and the movement of that vehicle is not going to adversely impact the species. It'll be, the whole track will be erased by the next rain.
But it also
Yeah.
came along some, some trails.
Oh, you're
that came
talking about
that went
Hobo
through
Hollow.
That went through the woods?
Yeah, I'm talking
sorry,
about
sorry.
Lake Leatherwood on the latest one. So
Okay.
I'm saying we're moving forward
Yes.
on that, and I understand your concerns, but we are moving forward. We are looking at that. We're saying, okay, how are you approaching the site? We discussed that. Then when you're at the site, what are you disturbing? Can you minimize disturbance? Stay on the trail, take the tools, pick up your log, put it and place it without necessarily doing the spin with the tool. So it has evolved from that, and I
Good,
think they're very much aware of that, of the process, and that's where this plan, I hope, will help out. But they're still going to require oversight, and it's going to require ongoing training. We'll train now, and I will encourage the next director to have recurrency training, just like anything. You learn it, then you learn a little bit more, and then recurrency, you're probably going to see new things. It's just like the team going through OSHA training. Now they're much more aware of the potential hazards, and they're responding to those and saying, oh, we need to move that, we need to do this. So we're getting through all these things in our training program.
Good, good.
Can I
No,
make
no,
a
really happy.
recommendation? Because, I mean, obviously you have a new document, it's draft, and you have a use case that you want to see if the document will address.
This is not draft, by the way.
Okay, final.
Yes.
But you want to see if it'll meet your use case and if it would be, that you could actually come forward with a scenario as can you tell me how I would work through this scenario
Yeah, yeah. Well,
as
this
a
is,
stress test for the NERP?
yeah. Well,
Because
this
it
is,
will need to be modified as you go along. It's
Oh,
a
yes.
living document, et cetera. It might be useful because then you can,
Yeah.
the specific use case that you have that you want to make sure that it fits. You
yeah.
could
Well,
test
this,
it.
when you talk about Hobo Hollow, this is something that happened.
I know.
So
Yeah.
it's,
I know. It's a good use case.
Right.
Because it's actually
Yeah.
something that happened, and I think would have probably been handled completely differently with the NERP and the process.
And that can be incorporated into training. We do that all the time in the aviation field. You have past events, and you go back and you say, okay, what went
Yeah.
right, what went wrong?
Lessons learned.
And you present that to
Yes.
someone and say, okay, what would you do? And, if you're trained up right, you'll probably get 95% of the right answers, but then you have to learn a little bit more. You have to learn that 5%. So,
Yeah.
And that could and probably will be part of the process in the department too, I would think, to
Yeah.
incorporate some way of doing the lessons learned moment.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I think the NERP is there. I don't think the process we've defined yet. The NERP is an amazing document, and I cannot say enough good things about the good work that you guys have done. But the process kind of fits around it. There's the checklist, but there's not the full process yet. And that's what we're going to hopefully work with Steve to kind of come up with.
we're going to have to work through it. We're going
Yeah.
to have multiple instances where we
Yeah.
go out there. We had minor changes, then when you have major and, the moderate and then major, we're going to have to go through those and work our way through it. These checklists will change because, we're going to discover new things. Sometimes we'll find we're too detailed. Other times we might not have enough detail. So,
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of these things, the really important thing is that employees know management cares about it. And that if the boss is talking about things, then the employees will pay attention. So I'm really glad that that's happening, both with the OSHA and with this, Steve, and that you are heading that and letting people know you care about it.
I always look at it, I feel like the employees always cared, but as leaders, we need to provide them with the tools and knowledge to do it. They're amazingly talented. They work hard if you consider the number of people you have working out there. But it's our obligation to make sure we provide them with the proper equipment, proper tools, proper training. And if we don't do that, then I can't look at them and say, well, you're not doing your job.
Right, yes. Yeah.
okay.
So that was the Natural Resources Preservation Plan. So I think, and on the back of that sheet, if you saw it, it had some, and I think we covered it all, pretty much introduction, impact, action, recommendations. These are just my brainstorming things, you could probably put in your own thoughts there. And the whole idea of this was to become aware that it is something that Carissa's starting to implement and bring into her program, and it's something that may incur additional costs and work when it comes to the park. And I would encourage you to, when the time comes, probably look at that position that Scott had printed. I've got a copy of it for a environmentalist type or naturalist type position so someone could focus on these things. It doesn't mean they necessarily control it, it's a matter of bringing together all those resources and tools so that they can come and present it to you. But budgets being budgets, that may not be possible. You might have to have another workaround there. So that's the NERP. Anybody have anything else on the NERP?
I think that the fact that it's, yes, thank you. The NERP is awesome, isn't it? I love that we have this now. The fact that it's 6 o'clock is helpful also, because now it is 6 o'clock. There is no one from the public here that I can see,
Okay.
so I don't feel like discussing, the shuttle discussion would be the one that people will hear more about. I would think.
Correct. The shuttle van auction or sale, that's the next item, and my job as interim is to carry forward some of the plans that Scott had in motion before, and to bring up some things, of course, that I feel like we need to carry forward with now, but to not go so far that I make it hard on the next director. My whole goal really is to make sure the next director doesn't have to come in and fix things. They ought to be able to settle in, get used to the system. The staff should be just moving along through their work, and then they can start applying their style, their technique, and it's easier on that person and it's easier on the staff. All these things can be quite stressful, especially when you have so many changes in leadership. So the shuttle van, well, let me back up. So my focus was looking at core. We're focused on core, which is, I think it was mentioned here today, is looking at what we do well, take care of our resources. Mark brought this up. We have so many things that we need to do, like the dam, lake health, watershed assessments. So the staff is highly focused on that. Right now, during weather days, we've been working on getting the building next to the headquarters cleaned out and geared back up. We hope to maybe one day turn that into a place where we can have workshops, and we can have a staff break area, and we can have a shop downstairs. So they're just getting these things kind of lined up for later on. Whether it goes forward depends on the next director, what that person might like to do. But it also focuses them on, say, taking care of the cabins, maintaining our trails, keeping the trails safe, because after these storms we had lately, we had a lot of tree fall. So they got their Sawyer training, they got their chainsaw training, so now they're able to go out there and safely remove the trees, and then we can take the trees and put them into maybe firewood or some other kind of recycle. So they're highly focused on that. I think it's working well. It doesn't mean we can't get into, or the next director might want to get into some new projects later on, but it's very important that we just do well with what we have. And there's a lot of things out there that we need to take care of and improve, like the bathhouse and the dam, and we mentioned all these. So one of the items is that I feel that we don't need to be involved with is shuttle van operations. I think this evolved, if I'm correct, when we had the downhills, we picked up some vans, and it was part of a package where we would have the downhills, and we'd also offer the public transportation from the downside to the upside and back and forth. And I think that was good, but now we have commercial alternatives. We have other folks that are willing to come in and assume that role, and then we have fee structures so that we can monitor that. There's a certain amount of income, and then we can also, they can focus on providing safe, quality service to the public. And then the park can focus on taking care of the downhills and the trails and the infrastructure. The shuttle vans themselves, I had these to hand out.
So is this just an idea, or have we gone to get proposals yet?
The whole idea of the workshop today is to put it in front of you so that you can say, this is what I need to know about it.
Okay.
These are the metrics I need, so that next meeting, you can have a vote on it. I would encourage you just to move forward with it, because the vans are not operating, not operating right now, because we have commercial sources for that. And the reason they're not operating is that I want to see if we can continue to provide quality service to the public. And if the financials look like, you're comfortable with the change, we can take the vans and either auction or sell the vans, whatever's legal in that process. And those monies can be turned back into vehicles and tools that are necessary for park staff. We have a big need to refresh our vehicles out there, our trucks. And this might be a way to do that. I think by providing the vans in this service, we not only have a cost associated with this. We also have a staffing requirement. So we have a lot of intangibles maybe out there that we don't really, there's a lot of time that is involved in bringing in part-time staff to man these or staff these, and then we have turnover in that. So there's a lot of these things that are not mentioned maybe on this spreadsheet or that I passed out. So the whole idea is to ask you to start looking into that and start asking for the types of metrics that you need to make a decision.
So do we get income from anyone else that drives a shuttle? So do we charge a pass to ride the trails? Yeah.
For the
So
shuttle.
even if it's us doing the shuttle or someone else doing the shuttle, we'd get that, we wouldn't lose revenue on the trails, correct?
Right now, the way it has been in the past, they can come, customers can come online, purchase a pass online or purchase a pass on-site. And the pass, I don't remember the exact amount, it's like $30 for a full day, $20 for a half day, and then they can ride the shuttle. But we also have, at the same time, we have running a contractor where they come to the park and they say, I need to buy so many bands, so many wristbands. And they use those, and they then give those, they sell those wristbands to their customers. And so we get the revenue from the wristbands. So it's a, what do you call it, a fee structure of sorts.
Yeah.
And then they make their profit by selling those bands and then doing the shuttling. And the
Do the people pay for the shuttle for the contractor?
Yes, they do.
Okay, do we charge for the shuttle?
When we operate the shuttle, we do.
Okay.
But we don't get any income from these other contractors.
No,
That's
In
what
the
I'm
forms
trying
of the
to get at.
wristbands,
Yeah.
we
We
do.
do, because they buy, that's the income, is they buy the,
But,
they buy them
okay.
ahead of time,
But that
basically. They buy
income
it in
won't
bulk
go
from
away.
us, and then they sell them.
The only income that will go away is, I'm looking at incremental revenue. So what I can't see here is this both the wristbands and the shuttle revenue, or is it just the shuttle revenue? Because
I
the
think on-
wristbands won't go away, correct?
Correct.
Am I making sense?
I don't have a copy of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, so is the Flybook this, or is it the shuttle, the cost of the shuttle?
Right now, we are getting wristband from one of the contractors. So right now, we do that, but when we operate, we're in competition with them in a way, because
Right.
now we're operating on, say, the weekends, when they can increase their revenue by running the weekends and during the week. So
But we won't lose that revenue, because if people come, they're going to need a wristband.
correct. You
Yeah,
don't lose the
assuming,
wristband
yeah,
revenue.
Leakage and all that, but they're going to
Right.
need a wristband.
Yeah,
What's the revenue just for the shuttle? Because that's what's relevant. If we outsource this, we'd still get the revenue for the wristbands. We're not losing that. But we wouldn't get the revenue for people to pay to ride the shuttle, right? Does that make sense?
Do
Right, and
people
that's the
ride
Flybook,
ships?
that's the Flybook in cash, because they register, they order their rides via Flybook. The Flybook is the name of the
Okay,
software.
so that's just the
That's the
shuttle rides.
$42,391.11. Now, I have not broken this down to the very
But is
precise
it-
detail. This is
that-
more of an overarching view.
That doesn't include any wristbands.
That's correct, because the wristbands are right below it. It says wristbands to the contractor, $4,500.
No, but the first one, does it include us selling wristbands?
Well, if we use wristbands, what happens is
Or for them
they
to ride the
purchase.
trails?
Right, when they purchase on the Flybook, is essentially purchasing, I don't know
A
if we're
bundle.
using the wristbands today or not, but they purchase, and then they can come and show that they have purchased before they get on the
They're
bus.
doing a bundle, so they're paying for the shuttle and the ride, right?
They come on to the Flybook, and the Flybook says, you want a day pass or a half-day pass?
Yes.
They take a day pass. Now, in the past, they have used wristbands. When they would show up, they'd say, show me your pass on your phone. Okay, here's a wristband. And this was without any contractors.
Okay.
Now, whether or not they're using, the wristbands became a bit problematic, so what they would do is they'd show them the fact that they paid on their phone, and it's kind of, okay, you're cleared to get on the bus, you've paid via the Flybook.
Okay.
So you don't duplicate that. Now, what this shows up here are those Flybook revenue sources from generating on Flybook, and below it is when the contractor also comes in and says, I want a bundle of 500 wristbands, because they use them, because that's how we control
So-
that revenue.
So we won't lose any revenue.
You will lose up here the flybook and cash.
Why?
Well,
Right.
in theory, though, and we won't know till we do it, some of those flybook people will be coming anyway, buying a wristband that
We
the
sell.
contractor would have bought from us anyway. So you may see how to track that, how to know how long it takes to see that, I don't know. But those same people will still be coming
So
and buying a wristband from
So
somebody.
if we have 100 people that are coming, whether they ride on our shuttle or their shuttle, they should be paying for a wristband. We should see those 100 people. They're not paying any extra to ride on the shuttle, correct?
Correct.
The shuttle is free.
The shuttle is free. So as long
Paid for
as
by the,
our contractors are enforcing people and checking that they paid for the ride, our revenue should not change, correct?
No,
I think we
When-
need to back this up because
Yeah.
I get exactly where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's back up to, there's nobody else but our shuttle bus.
Okay.
We have bikers that come, and they go online to buy a wristband because they're riding down the hill,
Yeah.
and they don't walk their bike back up the
Yeah.
hill to do another run, right? So they're going back and forth, and they're paying us $30 for the day
day.
to ride, just like you would a ski pass at a
Including
ski
the
resort,
ski
right?
lift, like a ski
So
lift.
you're
Okay.
paying for that.
Pass.
Now, then you have, so that's our revenue, that's our expense too. We pay for the shuttle buses, we're paying for somebody to drive it, and so net revenue, right? So we have that. Now separate that completely from this other contractor that we allow to come, and they might be running an event, they might be doing something, but they're out there and they're saying, okay, we're going to come buy from the park, we're going to have the van, we're going to load the bikes, we're going to do this, and we're going to charge these people $30, but we're going to pay the park $10. I don't know, it's not the same price, right? They pay us something for those wristbands.
Right.
But not the full amount that we would charge if they rode our
Okay,
thing.
so we will
So basically,
be
they're
losing
competing with
revenue.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if we give up ours, all that revenue that was coming, $30 a day from those people, we will lose money because now,
Right.
we'll also lose expenses.
Right.
So
Yes.
we'll have to figure out what that reduction is. But somebody's going to pick up the difference. So whether it's
Yeah.
another contractor, whether we say, hey, we sell these shuttles to a contractor and they have exclusive right to take people up and down the hill, but they have all the expenses, all the stuff, and we don't do that, but we still make $10 a wristband.
Got it. Okay.
So the whole business plan has got to be looked at from the
Yes.
perspective of
What ifs.
our expenses
Yeah.
of currently running it, what's our net
Scenarios.
income from that, right? Like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, are we really just making 20,000? Because by the time we pay for payroll taxes and all that kind of stuff for these people, and the insurance
Yeah.
and the everything, does it make sense for us to outsource that to somebody and let them have all the
Yeah.
liability of it, and we'll still make money on it?
So totally agree. And that's what I was trying to get at, was what was going to be our revenue impact? Because we'll still get something. I just wasn't sure if we would get the whole 30.
Yeah, we
or-
wouldn't get that.
And do we have contracts with these
I think
shuttle
that's what they're
people?
talking about
But-
and
It's
maybe
not a
doing.
contract, it's a fee-based system where they're permitted, their permit system. They have a permit to be able to act as a shuttle provider, and there's only one company doing it right now. So if we shifted this, we would gain more in van sales, but it wouldn't necessarily offset all the revenue we would get if we sold it all ourselves. So you won't lose all your revenue, it's just you won't make as much revenue, but then you'll lose the cost of the vans, cost of the insurance, cost of the, the seasonal employee type requirement, and you get to focus on core, which is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to do. So, yeah.
At one time
It
in the
looks to me
past-
like,
All right, go ahead.
may I? It looks to me like right now, all you're making in profit is almost what you're doing for the wristbands. If the expenses up above are subtracted from your income, it's almost what you're making for wristbands. So when you're saying that you eliminate the expenses, which is going to be a great deal of money there, then this will lower, but it's still going to be more than what the wristbands are right here on this list because of the $10 or $8 or $15 that we're going to be getting from the shuttle. So we're going to really have more profit by eliminating the expenses altogether. That's the way I understand this. Am I right?
I don't
Yeah,
know
to some
exactly
degree.
how all the numbers will balance out.
That's the hope, yes.
That's the hope, is it, because what I'm trying to decide, or not try to decide, is to understand what metrics do you need so I can build the metrics for the next meeting so that you can make an informed decision as to whether or not you want to
Okay.
keep it. I don't think we need to keep it myself, because if it's close to even, I want to focus on core.
Yeah, the way I'm looking at it is it'll look like we're wasting money. And this other way of eliminating the shuttles and letting them do it and having them the liability, we're going to be making more money in the long run. So
I think
I
so,
think
too.
But
it's a
there's a
smart
lot, to
deal.
me, there's a lot more. This is a very
General.
general, quick,
Right.
but I don't think by next meeting that we should be expecting that we're all ready to vote on something this big by next meeting. I think I would need to see what is our proposed plan. Are we just going to give everybody the right to do it and buy things from us? Or are we going to go out and exclusively pick somebody and let them be the sole person who handles all shuttles? Are we going to, or does it still make sense for us to do it all and not let anybody else do it at all? You know, like,
I'd like to see some scenarios
Yeah.
that said, you know, if we do, like scenario A, we outsource it all and we have an exclusive contract. This is what we think we'll get based on, and I think we need to break it down into this 43,000 into months and numbers so we can track it. We want to track this. And then do nothing, you know, multiple vendors, blah, blah, blah. I don't think there are any other scenarios. Are
I
there
think we-
do nothing, exclusive, multiple?
yeah, there's also this, you know, you look at this per year, this 13,667.40 for the payments. Well, that's only until they're paid off, right? And that we don't owe a lot.
Sure.
And I'm not opposed to the idea of
Yeah.
getting rid of shuttles at all. Don't get me wrong, I'm not. But I do think we really need to look at what we really want to do to replace it. What are the scenarios? How would we go about it? Do we want it willy-nilly, just let anybody who has a van come do it? Or do we want to really
Yeah.
get with one person and really create
I
a
would-
business arrangement where they are held tight to whatever restrictions we have about what you could do, how many you can do? But I'm looking at this too, and then I see in here, there's an income from operations, last year's shuttle income between the two. It looked like we had 53,000, almost $54,000 last year, 70,000 the year before in income from shuttle income. So it's significantly
not
sort of
even on
different
here.
here.
I would think that we would need to have contracts with these, unfortunately, we have somebody from procurement, with these potential vendors, with also clauses, because I think our biggest risk is that we outsource, and they're not enforcing people paying, and we lose revenue, because previously we could enforce it, because we wouldn't let anybody on unless they showed it. So we could have penalties that if we randomly stopped somebody and they hadn't paid, that shuttle driver would get a
Yeah, and there's
It's part of the permit. The permit process has a list of rules or guidelines for these drivers.
Okay.
In the past, when we tried to do and talked about, as the commission, having one individual exclusive, and we asked that individual, he's doing it now, Dustin Slaughter is a great guy at the time, trying to ask him for numbers. We didn't have enough history or data, nor did he. I think maybe we have a little bit more now to do it, because the numbers you're talking about, Chris, so he wasn't able to provide that, nor were we before to make comparison. He couldn't project what he thought he'd have. And as far as enforcing them, it's in their best interest to, because they're buying these things from us, and they're charging these people more. So they're not going to let someone on without a thing. That just doesn't happen.
So they buy them and then they have to, yeah, okay, good.
So
That's how they make
that
their
system
money.
kind of takes care of itself. And the permit process, whether you look for an exclusive, whether you look for a situation where we only have 3 permits or we only have 4, right now, the only person who even tried to come in to get one was Dustin, correct?
Correct.
And a couple years ago, when we put actual bids advertised in the paper for an exclusive contractor to do the shuttle, he was the only one who responded at the time, too, with a proper bid.
How many years have we done this shuttle? 3, 4, max?
Probably,
I have the sale, the purchase on the vans, I'd have to go back to find that, but it's been
4 or
since,
5.
yeah.
The first year, we had part of the money from the Waltons paying for the shuttle drivers. And so you can't look back, those numbers are, and the next year, it was a I forget, graduated, step down to how much they were paying the drivers. In order to, they wanted us to have shuttle, basically, is what it was.
Yeah.
And so the beginning of the experiment was having a shuttle we didn't pay for to make sure that guests who came were taken care of, and they used it. Once we took over and started doing it, we went through all these different iterations of,
Well, I know that's one of the things Steve's focused on, and I absolutely agree with him. We need to get away from things that are not our core responsibilities. And shuttle driving is obviously not our park core thing, but it is also a revenue driver.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes, it
you mean,
is.
is our core thing providing bait, to fish in the lake that, I mean, you could go
I
use
totally
that for
understand.
everything, for every single thing we do. And so if I'm coming across like I don't think this is a good idea, I don't mean to. I just think a lot of detail should be, and it
Yes.
really be thought out well before we commit to getting rid of a whole function that we're doing and the revenue stream. And at the end of the day, does it make sense, and is it less liability for us as a whole? Does it allow our employees to focus on what there should be focused on?
So-
Does it?
and are we able to provide the experience?
The
And
same
that's-
experience, right.
Because
We
the shuttle
even
drivers
know
can't, we
whether
can't,
this current contractor wants to do it every day.
Well, yeah, exactly. We don't know that. I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying is there's a lot that goes in this. It's not just these few numbers that matter. It's a whole thing, and I think it's certainly
So-
definitely worth our time to look at it, for sure.
So I'd like to see sort of like a ROI and break even and payback and all those sorts of things, but I don't know if that's something that we can pull together. Sort
Not
of like
easily.
from the start, where we had 0 as far as the cost of the shuttles.
Right.
But then we still had other operating expenses. From that point to now, have we made money? I mean, do we know that? Do we
It
know
looks like
what
we
the
have.
return on investment has been regarding the shuttle?
It looks like we
If you
have
look straight
made
numbers, it does look like it made some profit, but it doesn't always account when you come into staffing and you come into the time required when you have turnover and churn in your staff, the amount of time and money you're spending on that. There's a lot of other intangibles that we could probably, and that's the reason for this discussion. It's not so much that, and I agree, having something ready for the next meeting is probably a bit pie in the sky. But the whole idea of this discussion today is to do exactly what we're doing, is to say what kind of things do we need to look at to come to a reasoned decision, either way,
So, from my perspective, you wouldn't want to walk away from revenue unless you were going to get the same amount or more.
Now, you see, that's where I differ,
So I
because I
think-
look at core, and I
Well,
look
no,
at
no,
what
but-
we are as a park,
But I think
though.
it's both. I think, I agree with you, but even if you're walking away from core, this is profitable.
And
Can we make it equally profitable or more profitable and still walk away from core?
and I think the third
by-
issue is the experience. We hope to provide a good experience for these bike riders. The downhill needs a shuttle. And
Yeah,
so
but we'd have
that's
to-
an intangible
yeah.
thing too. If we don't have, when we were doing our own shuttle, and there have been times where we were doing it and didn't have people, and had people who were doing it without proper permits and causing problems in the
Mayhem,
park
yeah.
and mayhem and fighting with each other and all that. These are guests. These are our guests.
Yeah.
They're locals a lot, or somewhat the area locals and/or tourists, but park users who are the guests who are not getting the proper experience of being able to ride these trails. So to me, that's something, it's another intangible that's hard to put on paper. How do you measure?
Not necessarily.
Well, because
It's a
we-
requirement. So what are our requirements? And I think that's what we're trying to determine. So one of our requirements is to make sure that we're, that we're serving our guests and that they have a full service experience. So if we don't do it, somebody else needs to, and who is going to do that? And if we only have one, then we have that risk, what if. I would like to say one of the requirements should be that we're making revenue, because we're still going to, we still have bikes going up
Yeah.
and down, and those trails need to be paid
It's
for
good
to be
revenue.
maintained. Can we make the same amount of revenue or more? But first, we need to know what that current amount of revenue is. And then I guess, what are our other requirements? Having the staff focus on core competencies, freeing them up to do more value-add parks-related stuff than versus, but
I think-
that assumes, are we going to keep these drivers?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of almost need like maybe a 3 to 5 year range of this when it comes to expenses and stuff
Yeah.
like that, because how much longer are we actually even paying on these loans?
That
I mean,
was my
are they-
question.
Are they
What is
going to
our
be paid
loan?
off in 2 years, and in the third year, we're going to have this big shoot up in revenue for that, or not, or by that time, are we going to have to replace them completely because they don't run, know? So it's that kind of information, Steve.
Yeah.
I think in essence is what you're asking us. What kind of information do we need? And that's, for me, that's what I
I
would.
don't want to dive off into a science project and come back,
No.
and then you're going to say, well, wait a minute, wrong science. you know?
Yeah.
Another information piece I would like is when we talk about us providing shuttle, in the years that we've had the shuttle, we haven't always been able to provide full-time shuttle drivers. There have been times we didn't have drivers. There have been times we didn't have the availability. We had one, I think we had one at the beginning, maybe, it's just not having, if we're going to do it ourselves and be able to provide a shuttle every day that someone wants to ride, it's hard to compare unless we knew, did we do that before?
Well, right now, we are short shuttle drivers, and we were using some of our part-time staff and saying we're shifting them to the weekend. And so that took them offline, and we couldn't focus on what is important in the winter, which is getting our facilities freshened back up for the spring and the summertime. So to me, that was a time that we could do some testing and say, okay, we're not going to shuttle. We'll let the provider that we have right now pick that up. We'll watch the quality, hear if we get any complaints, see what our revenue is. So we're starting to get some metrics there.
Yeah, that's good. You need some
And
numbers.
how long we need to run that depends on what you want to do and what you decide with the next director. But I'm kind of starting it down that way because we do need to look at that carefully, I think, and then decide, do we really need to keep that as part of our mission?
That's a good way to see how many riders per day you're having to when just one person's doing it, which would be
Just needs more data.
I agree.
data.
I think everybody's probably leaning toward we shouldn't be doing this, but I think looking at the sort of multiple years data and stretching forward will give us a more informed view when we have conversations with who we might outsource this to make sure that we get what we're charging for the wristbands, what our terms and conditions are in those permits and contracts, what we expect from them, et cetera, whether we do an exclusive or multiple, those sorts of things will be informed by, okay, this is what we want to get out of it.
So basically, what we could say, we're basically saying, okay, we're going to give you $50,000 of our revenue that we were making.
Yeah.
So what are you going to give us for
Yes.
that? Right?
Yes.
And so is that, you're going to be required to buy our shuttle buses at a fair market value? Or are we going to, what are we going, as part of our contract, what are we going to do with you that, because we're guaranteeing you this much revenue, and you have use that word.
Exclusivity.
To run these people up and down in as many as you want, as long as you want, as many hours as you want, I guess. But it's
You
your
start the
business now, and we're
negotiation
basically giving you a business.
Yeah.
And you're paying us this much money.
Yeah,
Well, you
you
probably
start
could-
the negotiation with every upside we want to get out of it, while still making it a win-win for whoever we're partnering with.
Probably could put
But
some
we
kind of
need to
requirement.
know enough to be able to position this exactly like Mark said it. We're giving them a lot.
Well,
And
we're
Dustin,
giving them the net. Okay, now we're talking the 50, but then we have to offset that with the cost of the equipment. And I'm taking into mind that in maybe 2-3 years, the vans will be paid for, so that will change. So all those things I'm understanding from listening to you. I'm just not trying to, I don't want us to be thinking that, we're giving away tons of money right now.
No, no,
It
no.
has to be looked at
But we need to
carefully.
look at it enough so we can
When
understand.
you're selling a business, basically, you're kind of selling what the income potential is of the business, right? Like,
Yes.
not just
Right.
not just exactly what you are right now. So you're selling a business. What are your financials for this business? And our financial says we've been profitable, and now we're going to give it to you, and you're going to have the total right to do it, however you want. Blah 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 blah. And
These are
this
our
is what we
conditions.
expect from you.
Yeah.
And really, I think what we're saying as a whole, let's look at this, the big picture of this, and make sure when we do it, we do it right, and we
Right.
benefit everybody.
Yep.
And I just don't think it's a let's do it tomorrow thing. Also, I wonder what the value, what we think maybe the fair market value of our current shuttles are, because that could, that shows like, okay, this is also money back in our purse, so.
Yeah,
almost
and
like income.
what we paid for
And
them.
what we pay, yeah, so what
And
is
what
that?
is the loan value now?
Yeah,
And when it's paid off.
I know because Scott did come to us in the budget, if y'all recall, and said, maybe we should pay off these loans because they were low dollars. And
There
we're like,
wasn't
hey,
a
the
lot
interest
left.
is so low. And we're
Right.
like, no,
Right.
want to do that? Remember that?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that it's probably not a lot that we owe on them. And it'd be great if through this whole process, we not only, we offload those completely and the expense of that. Also want to ask, the drivers that we do have and have had in historically, that's all they were hired to do was drive those shuttles, right? They weren't like, we didn't take people off of mowing the grass over to
No, we
drive the
did.
shuttle.
No, we did,
No, we
because
did all the
We
time.
did because,
Yeah, we did.
is that because somebody quit or
it's
somebody?
just not
it's be-
predictable business either.
Yeah.
It's just, you don't know how many people are going to be wanting
So
to
don't
what was
work.
shuttle
their
all the
core
time.
hire for?
You would-
Was their core hire for shuttle, or was their core hire for jack of all trades?
As I remember, it was like bait shop shuttle driver. It would, you know, it would be, it would be both. And right
Okay.
now, we have some folks that, you know, do really, really good work, but what happens is we shift them to the weekend, one of them at least, to run shuttles on the weekend, and the shuttles, the operation is not always consistent because it depends on purchases. So you can have times where, you know,
And
they
you have
may or may not, and you
Seasonal,
still have that
seasonal
billet.
stuff.
So,
Well,
yeah,
one
so-
thing we do know for sure, that this area, Northwest Arkansas,
Mm-hmm.
is the fastest growing mountain biking area in the country, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're even moving different corporations here, they're moving people here to test drive bikes here in Bella Vista
And
and
all-
Bentonville.
And all the new trails
and all
going
the-
in the area, the
all
Highland
around
Trail.
here, so I just feel like this business is, this issue is going to get bigger and bigger. So it is certainly worthy of the time and effort to put into
Yeah.
the analysis.
And I think talking with Dustin Slaughter, who has, the one who's been doing the shuttle, in the beginning, when he first started working with us, it was newer to him too. The Passion Play trails weren't as extensive as they are now, because he brings his business over here with riders who do not just Lake Leatherwood, but they do Passion Play also. These are riders he takes to do all trails, not just
So
us.
he sort of sells an event, basically,
Right,
right?
he can do
like
that,
a
so-
tour.
And I think that he's been doing it long enough now, he's got more information, and maybe we could rely on him to ask for some data if we wanted to.
Yeah.
I think he'd be willing to.
Yeah. Steve, it may
Do
be
you feel
hard to
like
get
your
metrics on.
questions have been answered?
It may be hard to get metrics on this, but the other big question to me is, and I would like to see us out of not running shuttles, but I want to look at the alternative. I mean, we basically have a one-person business here. And I haven't been here very long, and there's definitely businesses that are very long-term, but there's a lot of businesses that have come and gone, even in the short time I've been here. What happens then? Are there other companies that might do this if it was a full-time business? What happens if he becomes unreliable and isn't providing the service we want? You know, it's
pull
not
his-
a
we
great
pull his
option.
permit. That's easy.
Well, it's
Right,
not.
but
It's
then
not.
what?
Well, do we have someone alternative to get the permit to? If we don't,
Yeah.
right now, if it's not the great option, then we have to pull people off other things. But we do have that option. But if we get rid of the vans and the company isn't providing that service, there's nothing we can do. So
You can-
I think we just need to really look into that, and I don't maybe if we can come up with some options and think how we might handle those situations, Steve.
I think what you're saying, Sue, is one of the arguments I would make for having multiple vendors rather than one
Yes,
exclusive
yes,
one,
yeah.
because I think you're right. We can have SLAs, which basically service level agreements that say, you know, here are your service level agreements that we expect you to operate, you know, between these hours and blah, blah, blah. Mark could probably come up with long, long lists, but we have those SLAs, and if they don't meet those, then there are, you know, performance.
Well, and then, I mean, and what Sue's saying is what every business owner in this town has. You know, you might get a bad employee, but you can't fire an employee because you need a seat you need a butt in the seat. You know, so they end up keeping people that aren't doing good because there's nobody to take their place. And every business in this town is suffering through that.
So
And so
you're
I
talking
think
about-
Sue's saying basically, okay, so we do give it to this one person, which is a really valid argument, and this person says, okay, we're going to do great, and they do good for 6 months, and then the 7th month, now we no longer have shuttles, and we can't get anybody else to
Yeah.
do it either. Now,
We-
I think in fairness, and one of the things that Steve said, there's basically only one person who's ever jumped in here and said they would be willing to do it at all, and that's Dustin, right? So it's not like right now, there's people clamoring over this. They're not dying to have this little business, you know, probably some people might do it as a side business or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is a concern, that's a reasonable concern because.
And it might be too big of a risk
Yeah.
to take.
There are 15, 20, 30, I don't know, bike shuttle services that do, and I'm just guessing on the number, and I just scan through real fast, but I see there are vans in my parking lots at Sparky, so it's kind of, it's just anecdotal. I see the names on the vans. I know there's lots of other shuttle services out there.
Okay.
Dustin's been the one we've dealt with, mainly because he was here first. He's the one we know, he's the one that does it. A lot of those shuttle services kind of come through, you don't see them, we don't know about them. I don't know where they go to Passion Play, they're driving through here, they're going to Rogers, they're going to Bentonville. There's lots of services out there, so if we do find that you want to do a situation where you want to make sure
So
you have
maybe-
several providers, you could
maybe-
reach out to all of them and say,
Yeah, we need to explore the market and see,
Yeah.
gauge the interest and see if we could get proposals.
And there's no doubt about it, the market today is not the same market, and it's like trying to say, well, this is how
Right.
today does not look like it did 4 years ago.
totally
when we
different, and that's
started
what's so
this.
cool about
I
it.
mean,
It's just,
It has grown so
Right.
much. The
we had one
business,
response
everything's
last time
grown.
we asked for bids, and that was
So-
crazy. Now we'd probably get 50.
Right, so.
And it doesn't mean we can't repurpose those vans and say, well, we want to take the vans and pick people up in town, like, well, the trolleys do come out, but we can get more people out to the park to enjoy the marina and the recreation and the other things. So there's a lot of different angles to come at this from.
There is.
So it's just good to have all these ideas, and I can take that, and it'll probably be a multi-month process, but in the meantime, we'll continue to collect data and see how well the current contractor performs without any degradation of service, and see what the revenue we get from selling the bands is, and then that'll help us, I think, map it out. We can also go from the point that I started that, look back and say, okay, what was the performance back then, and then build out a few models, and then give those back to you guys.
Steve, do you
Are
know
we
what
in
we
a-
sell the bands for? Like, what is the price point for the bands for for the
Yeah.
outsourced shuttle driver? Is it $10 a band? Is it 15? Do you know?
They come in, they're buying $500, I think it's $10 a band is what it is. No, yeah. I'd have to, no, I'm sorry, about $5 a band, because they come in and they spend $500. They typically come in and say, oh, I need enough bands for $500, and they go out and do their thing. But I'll find that out to make sure, yeah.
And those bands,
Seems
and
so
here's
cheap.
another thought about that. So they can buy 500 bands for $5, but they could use those bands over a month, right? There's not 500 bands for today.
Correct, because the number of riders varies on the weather, varies on, the temperatures and all the rest.
So I think what might be worthy of thinking of, and you're just like, what do you think the price point of a band should be if we give up our part of that revenue?
Good point.
Should we
Yeah, yeah.
charge $10 per band, or, would that make up a difference?
Okay.
And we looked at one time, not that it matters, but having a way to make the bands be for one day only, having them, what do you call it? Like when they've been used, they're
Degrade.
used.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And I
having
don't
it so
know-
that they expire.
they've done different things like that to
Yeah.
make sure that happens.
Because
I don't know.
otherwise you could reuse it, or.
They had
there's
stock,
ways, yeah.
there was old stock that was by day of the week.
Yeah, that's
And
what-
And there
we're
might be
we're
pros
going
and cons
through
to
those.
all of that, and I think ultimately what we're all saying is, yeah, let's look at all of those things,
Yeah.
and we're.
And
I-
see how they're doing it over in the other
Other places, yeah.
places
Yeah.
around here.
If you just look at our expenses, and you look at the number of people roughly that our income indicates, which is around 2,000, it costs about $20 per rider. So that $10 that we're making, that seems reasonable. But again, this is just based on very, very high level. It'd be interesting to see, what do we think the cost point is, based on assuming our costs are an average?
Yeah.
What should we be charging? And I guess that my final question is, if everything has changed, are we in a strong enough position to take bids? I mean, I know people weren't clamoring before, but if it has changed, I
They
mean,
should
because we
be
could
now.
go to Bentonville and Rogers and have local as well as external, because a lot of people go there and then they come, to other places. Is it attractive enough to do a
That's where
bid?
Dustin comes from. Dustin is not actually here. There were some
Oh, right.
local people doing it, but he operates in Rogers or Fayetteville or
Okay.
something. So.
And Steve, during season, I mean, I know winter's a little different, I would hope. Do we operate full scale during season every day of the week, or just 3 days, just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Or, do we do
The
it during-
park typically operates on the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, from what I understand from the past history. because it depends on your riders, how often, you operate the van and burn the gas, and you only have 4 riders, it's just, and they can self-shuttle. That's another the option that's out there, so it doesn't mean that someone who comes in the middle of the week. And when it comes to the
How do they
contractor.
self-shuttle? I'm just curious
different
about
cars,
that. What
two
do they
different
do?
people.
They just have, like we do with kayaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody
two cars.
parks the park.
They
Okay.
have parking at the top, and then, a
They'll just
buddy will
alternate.
go down,
Yeah.
right, yeah, and they'll
Okay.
do that.
Okay.
And, just casual conversation with the contractor is, they're providing some of that weekday shuttling, but they don't see it, from my understanding, as a highly profitable thing. And so making more on the weekends is good for them, and then they can continue to provide that service during the week, even though it doesn't necessarily make them a lot of money. It's one of those quality things, and we'll provide it, but it isn't, if we had our druthers, if we're going to compete with you on the weekends, it doesn't help,
Right.
type thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, do the vans, shuttles, do they ever leave the park? They're basically always right there at the trails, correct?
Ours are. They're out there at the Lake Leatherwood and parked.
Okay.
So they sit idle probably more than they operate. Now, again, all these metrics I'd have to pull up, so.
Well, it's not like they pick them up at the hotel and then take them out there with their bikes or whatever. So the reason why I was asking the question is there any advertisement on the side of the vans to help promote? Otherwise, it's not necessary because they don't travel on the street.
No, we don't. As a matter of fact, one of the vans has old advertising. It's called Shuttlebug, and I have no idea what that was all about. But
We sold spots on those
Yeah.
shuttles to other businesses who might want, that they thought bike people would want to see. We sold a few spots. There might be some left from that.
Oh, okay. So, and I remember there were offers on the website that said if you wanted to advertise on vans, but I don't know of any revenue that was generated lately on that offer. The website's being remodeled right now, but I don't think there was much revenue from that. Yeah.
Sounds cool. But that's actually not a bad idea. That could be,
Start
a
picking
pretty
people
good,
up at the hotel?
interesting
it's like
business model.
our
And love the
hotel-
advertising revenue.
Our hotel is going to put bike racks in the rooms because people bring their bikes.
Yeah.
And they don't want to leave them on their truck or on their trailer or whatever because they're afraid they'll get stolen. So we'll put them in their room on a rack. And so they're always asking us, how can we get to the trail?
Yeah.
So if the shuttle also included one loop somehow or other to pick up from prearranged hotels that have agreed to do it, then maybe we would make money off of that.
It
Yeah,
might
that's-
be even, that's kind of something we should also consider. This is the existing business model. Is there a slightly different business model that might be more lucrative? And would we in-house or outsource that? I think
And-
that's a really good point. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
because
should
right now, I
consider
think
that.
we do have shuttles that come downtown, but they're private enterprise that come by the hotels and pick folks up and take them down to the drop-off, and then at the drop-off, we operate our shuttles.
Right.
Or our permitted carrier operates that loop.
Yes.
Because I'm just assuming the shuttle that's at the park just continuously goes back and forth.
Correct.
Dropping
Within-
people off and come down and pick them up and take them
That's
back.
correct.
If they want to do it all day long, right?
Correct.
Because you said something about buy $30, it's all
That's-
day long,
yeah.
$15 or
Yeah.
$12 whatever for a half a day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then that shuttle could never run off and go to the hotels and pick them up and then take them out and then
Right.
take care of them and then return them back to the hotel.
Yeah, 'cause
And
they're-
that-
No,
Correct.
there would
And
need
they're
to be
busy going down.
another,
Yeah.
There would
I
have
think-
to
I
be
think-
another
That goes in the
shuttle.
And those are the
opposite
ones I see in my parking lot at Sparky's. It's those shuttles, like I said, coming from Fayetteville or going to hotels, picking people up, taking them to the park or to Passion Play or to wherever, dropping them off, and then those people are using another shuttle once they get there. They're using ours or
Right.
Slaughter's or whatever.
And we don't operate both shuttles every time, every weekend. Sometimes we just operate one. It depends upon how many
But we
folks are out
have two
there.
available.
We have 2 available, correct.
Okay. My gears are clicking.
Yeah, no, I think this is.
There are a
it.
lot
I
of
think it's-
variables to this.
It's worth exploring
Yeah.
options and then coming up with a really well-thought-through, well-informed, robust proposal, but.
My point is, I'm not adverse to the revenue stream side of it, because I think we need the revenue to help manage the park. My thing is that, given our staffing levels and our need to focus on core and really do quality work with what we do, I don't like to dilute.
Sure.
Because then that makes it harder to deliver good quality service in the cabins and
Sure.
on the marina and the rest.
Totally get
But-
Okay,
So that's the shuttle one.
that's the shuttle.
And thank you very much. That is exactly what I was hoping to hear, so it's very helpful. So, the last one is discussion on Independence Day event planning and status. Is that correct? Is that what I had on? It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Current status, and
Is this at Lake Leatherwood?
that's correct. Like whether- And that is progressing well. We've had several meetings between CAPC and one of our business leaders and park staff. And they are bringing together various ideas, putting it in spreadsheet format. Nothing's decided, but they're putting down all the different options about vendors. Some of the things they're talking about are, instead of having, say, just an evening event on the 2nd, is to have an all-day event. Because with an all-day event, if you can get vendors, food vendors out there, it's more of a go out, enjoy the park, do some kayaking, do some paddle boarding, do some hiking, and then in the evening, they come in and have your dinner. You can have your lunch, and then you can have your dinner from the vendors maybe, and then you can sit down on a blanket and watch the fireworks and then go home. So they're looking really hard at building a better outline for the 2nd, and then it shifts over toward the city on the 3rd and the 4th, so it's kind of like continuing that celebration into the city.
And would those be like food trucks?
I don't know that it's decided exactly what they would be, but I would envision food trucks. Yeah.
It seems to me that there is no plan as yet, and that we're still in the early stages of the working relationships. So I would go with recommendation 1, because I don't think we're at a plan yet.
Correct. Yes. Well, I didn't mean the recommendations as choose between. The recommendations were to look at all these and evaluate the plan as it progresses, so we continue the collaboration. We evaluate the plan as it goes along, which is something I think Sue was very interested in, saying before we expend money, we need to be talking about what we can afford, what is in our wheelhouse, so to speak, and then and manage those various elements. And then recommendation 3 would be discuss the event planning for Lake Leatherwood, with a look at 1 major and 2 minor events per year. Now, that is outside of really just the Independence Day. It's saying that Independence Day seems to be a pretty large undertaking, and that's good. I think it would be a very good event if we can do it correctly. But then we need to have probably 2 other smaller events in the year bracketing that, which will bring people out to the park. So not to forget that we still want to do those. And whether or not that comes from someone else coming in, like Sue said, to provide a venue, well, we need to attract someone then. What kind of programs would we want to do?
So what
Some
is
new
the
traditions
plan?
in the park.
Yeah.
Like 4th of July was a tradition in the park. It'd be nice to have something else that becomes an annual tradition that's big and brings people in. I don't know.
One
So I
of
was-
the issues they're having right now, and I'm sure you're aware and read the paper or whatever, but they're down a couple of people at CAPC.
Oh.
People who were going to be very involved in this plan. I think according to Susan, there's a couple of people that have jumped in the downtown business arena. And I think they'll probably be more focused on the downtown Basin Park kind of activities for July 4th. And it may be time in the very near future to start soliciting maybe some community support for volunteers to start with helping for anything at the park, whether it be whatever the team may be, cleanup or,
Traffic control.
organizing, park, I mean, all those different things. Maybe you could get a volunteer group that would get excited about a July 4th celebration of fireworks in the park.
I think,
My
yeah.
recommendation would be not to try to create a new group, because having tried that, it's very, very difficult in this town because so many people are involved in so many things.
Right.
But if you could get somebody to take it on, like what was it? ESSA took on the Outrageous Parade. They took it under their wing and they created the volunteers, et cetera. So I don't know if there's a group that it would fit with, but it might make sense to try to solicit somebody that a group that's already formed and already has those
The local
volunteers.
fire departments around here, the volunteer fire departments have lots of volunteers that are good for stuff in the park.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
then-
this is sort of what I'm saying. I'm not really talking about
Maybe
creating a
the-
hope, but I'm just like, hey, are any volunteers? Here's what
Right.
we're planning on doing. Does anybody want to work in this? You get a front row seat to the fireworks, you know, if you're a volunteer.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah, get your
it's like
organization
handing out
involved.
things at the
The
Broadway
Elks or
shows, and you get to see the show.
Yeah,
Rotary,
what-
the Rotary
yeah.
Center,
Rotary
Rotary Center
Center,
too,
that
things like
kind of
that.
thing. An
Those specific
existing group.
groups, those groups, existing groups need to be.
Chamber.
Or high school kids in detainment or
Oh, great.
in the back,
Detention.
in detention, yeah. They get to come work with me.
Community service, the ones who have to work off community service.
But it would be nice,
Yeah.
there's
But it-
there's a lot to this, and you know, they're already working really hard. I talked to Susan Luddy earlier about it, and they're working really hard, but they did lose manpower. And so I feel like there's still momentum, but there's a lot to do.
The website, we're hoping will be up toward the end of the month, if not early next month. And then Susan has a plan to start doing some more outreach. She already does a lot via Facebook. So we'll just have to make sure we don't let her go.
Yeah.
You know, she has so much energy, you have to say, okay, we can go this far, and then this is what we want to do in outreach and stuff. So we definitely have a lot of energy in the team that is there. Just to go through on the spreadsheet, and I can get you a copy of the spreadsheet, the event details they get into is that they talk about live music, of course, the fireworks, food and drink vendors, and they break those down into various ones. Parks nature-themed vendors, they break that down. Various activities such as face painting booths, bouncy house, water balloon toss. They're getting into a whole bunch of various ideas, just brainstorming. Then they get into staffing resources, so they're looking hard at that. Facilities and parks, about portable stages and portable, facilities for the folks that are there. Marketing and PR is part of their consideration. And I had mentioned to them also advanced coordination with fire department and police, of course, because we need to have them engaged, and they've already asked to be included in that discussion, because they're going to have to make sure that they can support it, and it's,
So,
you
Steve,
know.
keep saying they're assessing this, but who's going to find those people and coordinate? And
What's
that's a lot of work.
That's what Juanita's doing, right?
This is what Susan, Juanita,
Susan.
and then Lacey are doing
Lacey.
together.
And
They
Lacey.
built this entire spreadsheet, and
Okay.
they've been having meetings, so
So is this CAPC? Because Susan works for us too, right? So,
that's correct.
but you're talking CAPC?
Well, we need to lean back into CAPC, but they've had some staffing
Yeah, there is no
changes, so.
Yeah,
Mark said
because
no one-
if our staff start working on that, that's going to eat up so much office time. Nothing else is going to get done for weeks.
Well, that's my job, to make sure it doesn't eat up the office time for my job and for the park, so.
But that is Juanita's
she-
job
she
to do events
balances
in the
it out.
park, so, right? It's part of her job to do the events in the park.
It is,
right?
it is. And
Hence the reason I was
CAPC
talking
is
about
there, and.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just want to make sure that this is, there's supposed to be 3 entities involved in this, and I just want to make sure it doesn't all fall back on parks, and there is, it becomes a
No,
reasonable
no.
workload.
We're going to be
on
reaching
parks.
out. I'm sure CAPC, as they go through their process, will have someone else who rolls in, and I don't have any problems with that. I think this is one of the, you have hiccups as you go along, and staffing changes. We've had staffing problems, too.
Right, yes.
And when you just have to get through them, so.
And from past experience in 4th of July things, it's probably the only event you don't have a hard time finding volunteers for. There's
Good.
lots of groups that like to volunteer for it.
I think as long as we have groups that are sort of bringing those
Yeah, as long as we don't have to do it, but it's like, once someone finds the groups, but they,
Because you
they-
don't
they
want to
rally.
have, like, being a volunteer coordinator and making sure your volunteers are where they need to be, you don't want to be doing that.
No,
You want somebody else to own that.
They are volunteers.
who are these groups?
Well, we don't know. That's what my point was, that maybe reach out and find if there's a group.
Rotary
It could be
Club.
a million different people who say, hey,
Yeah.
we would love to do it. Yeah, we'll
The
get to
high
be there
school
for fireworks. and
Environmental group.
I'll be in the
And-
front.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I'll get to see it. And I'll get
So
to,
how would you get these groups?
well, Susan and the team there is a team that got together, and I don't know how many people know Lacey, but she does the whole Jeep Jam that had over 1,000 Jeeps.
Yeah,
We
Lacey
managed
does
to
great.
get all
Yeah,
that
it
kind of
was
stuff. So
crazy
she's
this
really good at the coordination of all that kind of stuff. She jumped in on this team to help do this stuff, and as a business owner in downtown, she's
Right.
doing a lot of that stuff. But she's really good at these kinds of things, and she's working with Susan and Juanita. And but the people that at CAPC that were going to be part of this whole thing are no longer with CAPC, from my understanding. And so I guess they they may meet, that they may have a meeting in the near future and assign somebody
Who
else to
is
do it, I don't know.
Juanita?
Huh?
Who is Juanita?
She's the lakes
Parks
manager,
employee at the lake.
Oh, yes.
Lake
Right.
Leatherwood manager. Yeah, and CAPC, you know, they have leaned into this very
sure,
much.
yeah.
I mean, they're contributing, they're offering resources and stuff, so that isn't going to go away. It's just we have to reestablish the connections, that's all that is. So I don't really see it as being a big problem unless we go months and months and
Do
months
they
without
have, Steve,
staffing.
anybody from the city, I don't know what they have in the city that's participating, I don't know, somebody from Public Works or anybody that's actually actively on the team that's creating the events and stuff like that? Or is it just us and CAPC people?
Well, I think public transportation, the trolley folks, they rolled in and said, hey, we're willing to help transport and, you know, engage in whatever way that fits in. I don't know exactly what that'll be, but there's, you know, there are folks out there that are ready to participate. I think right now it was just mapping out the various things, and then we have to map out, okay, who's participating, how do we bring this all together? And we're really still in the early stages. I mean, we just started this, I don't know, about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think Susan was telling me that, you know, they have some deadline times because by spring break time, you're going to have to commit to something. I mean, because it's starting to get to where
Yeah.
you wait any later,
Yeah.
it's
Too late.
It's too late.
Yeah.
So they're, I mean, I know they're
I
working
think it's
hard.
a good idea.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, but I agree, we need a bit more information, so.
What's developing, and I think on that one, the whole idea was to discuss the collaborative effort, that it's and it is, I think it's great. It's great for the city, it's great for all the various organizations to be working together on this thing. And it provides a very special multi-day, multi-venue event. So it's kind of unique in that regard, probably. And the action is those the things that are ongoing. Park staff has been coordinating with CAPC and the event planners. And Parks and Recreation Commission, this body right here, approved some of the funding. And so we have to get a hold of the fireworks provider, and he was going to look at the plan and say, based upon where the launch site was, whether or not there needed to be any adjustments. And Susan just reached out to him today to say, hey, look, we need to get the contract finalized and the funds sent to you, so then we can get reimbursed for the other parts that come from CAPC and the city. So the recommendation was, again, continue, evaluate, and that in regards to Independence Day, those are the two recommendations that relate to that. So I think we're on track, and it was, you know, brought up at the meeting because I think it's a very important issue that we need to be building out our plan as we go along, so.
I think it's also scalable. from what
It
I
is.
Because you can have big hopes and dreams to have all these different things, but at the end of the day, as long as we have those fireworks ready to go and set up,
Be okay.
you know, maybe you
And
don't have
those
as many food
toilets.
trucks as you wanted,
Right.
or maybe you don't have face painting, but you
Yeah.
got those fireworks.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
we
mentioned all
wanna
those
make
things,
sure.
yeah, that was the
And the
brainstorm
toilets.
element. you know.
And the toilets.
Yeah.
And the toilets, yeah.
And
Important priorities.
again, we're not going to step out and start signing contracts and start committing to things until we get this thing a lot more solid as far as what we envision being possible, and then it'll come in front of the commission again, especially when it has to do with, committing funds.
If,
I'm excited
just
about
on
it.
an aside, if you're looking for face painting, we used the high school art club, came and did face painting, and they were amazing. We gave them a bit of money for their time, but we did that for an event, and that's a way to bring community stuff in, because a lot of them are also on the environmental committee or environmental group that may be willing to volunteer. Just
And
saying.
they, at various times in past Independence Day things, we did things like we let, say wherever we decided to let cars park, if that group, so let's say Rotary, if Rotary Club decided they wanted to control the parking and
money.
and be in charge of the face painting kid things that's right next to the parking, then they could take the parking money, and they charge people to park.
That's a great idea.
There's not a whole lot of parking out there, most of it will be shuttling in, but the parking that's there, they took money. Another time, we have places where we let people put jars out next to their area, so
Yeah.
they can make money off for their group too, so
Yeah.
that's good.
They used to have fireworks at Holiday Island, and to even get on the island, there would be people standing there asking for money.
Right, right.
You couldn't get on the island unless
Wow.
you paid the fees.
They do that at Beavertown too, because they do ones out of Beavertown, and you have to, but you can see them if you're not where they pay. But if you go a little bit past where that little booth is, you pay to go back past the booth.
So that's all I had on the fire, or the Independence Day piece, unless there are any questions.
No.
And if there's any other topics you want next work session or workshop, let me know. There's all kinds of things to discuss, I'm sure, but.
Okay. And then we'll have our little Thursday, let's see, Thursday, 5 o'clock.
Is-
5 o'clock.
Is that going to be here?
right?
Because
I think it is.
I'm in the library.
I think she said that was the reason why they were connecting with them,
So they
because
could
it's got to
Zoom
be
in.
streamed.
Yeah, it's got to be streamed. It's an
Actually, we're
actual,
voting,
right.
so it has to be
Yeah,
streamed.
you're right, it's a real special meeting, yes, it will be here.
Yeah.
Okay. And if Mark wants to call in on speakerphone, if he's
Yeah,
not-
I will
could-
definitely
could
call
I-
in.
It's
I
not too
won't be
far
able
into
to
happy
Could I
hour.
call in as well?
That's fine.
Yeah, because I won't be here.
She was setting it up for me to do Zoom, so maybe the three of us
Yes,
could Zoom.
Yes, yeah, I can Zoom.
Because
no
I'll be at
problem.
work.
Yep.
I can't talk, but I can Zoom.
Okay,
So-
perfect.
Can
And
you
if
do
there's,
sign
and there'll be,
Yeah.
and Kim knows that already, so she'll be sending you a Zoom invitation. I'm sure it'll come from City Hall, you'll get it. And if you can't Zoom, you can just call in, wherever you are, you can't get Zoom.
So just let Kim know that you need to be on the Zoom, and then she can put you on it.
Can we give thanks to Steve for his presentations tonight?
Absolutely.
Yes, we can.
Of course we can.
Good job.
Make him cookies or something.
But we wanted to talk, Ruth, you wanted to talk about signature thing.
Signature thing, yes, before we break up here. So I need to make sure. Let me think. We need a motion at a regular meeting that says, these are the people that can sign. Right, I'm talking out loud. And the regular meeting can be a special meeting. And I can tie it on to that same day.
I think we need to do that
I think we should,
Thursday,
too.
and we need to be ready to get that to them on Friday, so midweek, next week at the latest, we can have whoever else can sign, which would, yeah.
Be good. And then Andrea said that she can do e-sign documents, so you don't have to
Yeah.
physically come in. So that'd be good.
Oh, that's good.
Because that's going to be key.
Because when we do new ones, even those old ones will have to re-sign too.
Right, we all, yeah,
Right.
everybody, it's like a whole new card every time when they change that.
Okay. So I'll talk to Kim about adding that extra thing. It's the only thing that works.
I usually have a long list on my hand as well.
I did it on my wrist, because then I can wash it off when I want to. You have to wash your hands a lot, but you don't have to wash this
Yeah,
part
I
of your
usually
wrist. You
just
can wait
end
till
up
you've seen
with
it 3 or 4
smudge,
times,
but then-
and then wash it.
But if you wash it, then you have to rewrite it, and that reminds you again.
Do you need a motion for adjournment?
Not on a, not on.
Not for workshop,
Not for
we really don't. We
workshop.
can just decide
We
we're
can say
done, unless
goodbye.
somebody has your
Goodbye.
I'm hungry.
And yeah, just count on that next little meeting, having a extra meeting part of it for the,
Signature.
thank you, God.
6